Hey everybody, I've been dying to learn more about paper piecing, and I've got a great little pattern designed by Natalie Crabtree that I think will help us all get a little bit better at paper piecing. So what do you say? Let's get started. That's right, everybody. Hello, I am your host, Rob Appell from Michael Miller's Making It Fun right here on YouTube. I'm super excited to see you all here. And yes, we're going to do a little bit of very easy paper piecing today on Natalie Crabtree's wonderful quilt pattern called Forest Findings. It has some really easy patchwork in it. As you can see here on the pattern cover, real easy blocks like this. But I want to take a few moments today and just focus a little bit on some simple paper piecing techniques. Number one, because I'm pretty terrible at paper piecing. My brain goes so fast, it's hard for me to keep all of the directions. So I'm going to offer just one or two little tips if I can that I've learned from some of my friends, primarily Violet Craft. Thank you, Violet, for teaching me about paper piecing. I'm sorry, I'm nowhere nearly as proficient as I should be, but why paper piecing? Paper piecing because it's one more skill that we should have. Doesn't mean we'll use it in every quilt, but there may be a time where you really want to make an amazing quilt block that requires paper piecing. So we should understand the basics so that we can do it if the opportunity arrives. So, using your free pattern, Michael Miller website, go to the inspirational link, free download, Forest Findings, and there are two different mushrooms we can play with. We've got our roundy top and our pointy top here, and of course they're made out of the hash dot fabrics from Michael Miller. This hash dot is a negative space relief that shows polka dots like all good mushrooms should have on them. Maybe not, I don't know. And then of course the cocoa. The cocoa is that wonderful little micro dot texture that works perfect in the stems or the stalks of our mushrooms. So again, using some real fun basics, you should be able to find those at most of your local quilt shops. And as we dive in, I've got all the pattern info here. I'm going to set it aside. I'm going to start to focus really first on my cutting instructions. So each of the little pieces, if you've never done paper piecing at all, we're going to go in a numerical order, and each piece has its own specific size and space. And a lot of this is a scrap builder or burner. So when you're using these sizes, just cut at least this size square. If you had something that was maybe it's calling here for a 4 3/4 by 5 3/4, and you had a 5 by 6-inch square, just leave it. Don't trim it down because we're going to be cutting and shaping the pieces into place as we go. So you need to have at least this size piece. And as you can see here, I've gotten myself organized as I'm working along and setting the appropriate fabrics with each as we go. So let's dive into one of the larger blocks just so we can talk about it a little bit as we go through. So here you can see that I have two different shades on my pattern piece. On this particular pattern piece, and I can only speak for this pattern right now, but we have color coding or shaded. So my shadeds are going to be my print fabrics, and my non-shaded or my lights are going to be the background. In this project, I'm using the jet black, and on the original pattern, there was a cream color fabric being used. I do want to trim away some of this excess, but you can see there's a solid line. That solid line will be actually our stitching line. And then there's a dotted or kind of lighter colored line. That is the 1/4 inch. So as we trim away, let's not cut on the 1/4 inch. Let's just kind of shave away the paper so that we can see what we're doing and that we can work accordingly. Okay, so I've trimmed down basically to the 1/4 inch arena, not all the way onto. And the next thing I want to do is I want to set a seam or a crease on this folded line or sewing line so that I can work with the fabrics. So now I'm just going to real delicately take and fold that over, creasing it, and I really want it as accurate as possible. Some folks will take a piece of cardstock or a business card and fold it along that line, but that is that fold right there. That'll become important, and I do like to fold it on the printed sides of the paper together. Now, I've chosen a solid because solids are so much easier to use because there's no right side, wrong side. One of the challenges with paper piecing is when we open it up, we don't often get our pieces to maybe where they need to go. Maybe I would be off in some kind of odd way. So this is what we're going to focus on today, is just how we line up our pieces. So because of that, I've also chosen a print on purpose because that should be more challenging. And the one thing I've learned about the prints, again, thank you, Violet, is we're thinking about everything working from the back back side. Everything is opposite. The patterns are generally transposed. So when I'm looking at a print, I'm going to always start with it in the face down, print sides down, wrong sides up format. And as you'll remember, the shaded pieces of the patterns are for our print. So as I lay this on here, I'm going to make sure that I have my 1/4 inch, my fold here. I have a 1/4 inch at least all the way around. I want to cheat this over a little bit if I can. Okay, and before I do anything else, you know I have one straight pin here at Making It Fun, so we're going to use that today. And I'm not going to put it near that line. I'm just going to put it over here somewhere to hold the paper to the fabric. You could use a glue stick. That also works nicely, especially on the smaller pieces where this pin may get in our way. So the first thing we've done is we've now secured our paper to our fabric. I'm going to fold this back like this. This is our sew-in line. So I need to now make an exact 1/4 inch so that this is easier to set in the second piece. So you could use an add-a-quarter ruler. You could do all kinds of different tricks. But right now I'm just looking at the 1/4 inch markings here, and I'm pushing down securely on this part because that pin is kind of in my way. So if you had a flat, like one of those flower pins, that might be better, but I only have one pin, so we're going to use that one today. Kidding. Okay, cutting that off, that is now the 1/4 inch seam allowance that is going to match to the piece I have and the piece I want to bring in. Now, the other thing I've learned is when we go to match these up, we always want to make sure that our piece we're going to bring in is going to fit within its home. And its home is where it's going to live when it's all done. So right now, as I'm manipulating this, I'm looking at this 1/4 inch. That's why that was so important. So I need to shift this down a little bit here like that. Okay. Now, one of the easiest ways to do this, and it's kind of a challenge. This is where we go backwards, upside down, and sideways all at the same time. I'm going to put my finger here on the piece that is not secured, but I'm securing it to my fabric that I want to be stitched there eventually. Because it's pinned or glued, I can flip this over, right? And as I flip that over, this is now showing me where that 1/4 inch line is. You can feel the paper in here. I know that's my 1/4 inch line. So I, again, could securely, safely, and I'm doing this kind of backwards and slowly so you can see my hand movements, right? I can now come in here carefully, because I'm a little bit upside down, and cut off that piece. That piece there has now denoted both sides of my edge work, my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now what I can do, remember though, this needs to go right sides together, is I can bring this up and I have to rotate it 180. Okay, so that came up onto the top. Maybe as you practice, it would be easier if you use 2 print sides or 2 print fabrics so that you can actually really get the feel of how to position and how to play with this. But again, solids are easy. This is what we're using. Let's look and see if we did this correctly. There's a way to check. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold all of my layers. I've got all of them pinched, so the black, the red, and the paper secured here. I'm folding this back this way, but as I go to my 1/4 inch seam allowance, I did have to flip it over because I need to be able to stitch on this line. I'm going to stitch past that 1/4 inch seam allowance way out there because that's what I'm hoping we're securing, right? Now I'm going to come through here again, sew all the way through. And I'd also like to point out that I'm using a polyester thread right now. You could obviously use cotton, but we're going to be pulling and tugging at the paper to remove it later. So the stronger the thread, the better. And you may not want a super tiny stitch length. I'm using the standard 2.5 millimeter today, where normally I talk about using a 2 millimeter stitch length instead. So at any rate, let's cut this fabric. Let's thread, I should say cut the thread, don't cut the fabric yet. Let's get this out of the machine. And the first thing we want to do is as we roll this over, we're looking to see if we landed in it. And I don't know that I landed perfectly there. So let's get that iron hot and press it first before we make any further evaluations. So as I come over here, I'm going to go ahead and just press to that seam. I haven't removed the pin. I haven't removed the glue because I may need to get back in there. I think I shifted my fabric a little bit when I went ahead and adjusted. Now I can see that I'm within my 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. So I'm going to barely make it. Normally, I would encourage you all to go ahead and take out this thread and shift this fabric down a little bit, but it really isn't going to matter on this piece because we are going to catch it. So let's just keep moving forward and keep talking about the next phases of this, but just pointing out here that we want to always make sure we have a little bit larger piece. So back to my instructions, like I said earlier, these are the minimum requirements. I really like to work from larger scraps so that when we do press this open, we have everything we need. But this is also the benefit of paper piecing. I can cheat this small little seam and still catch it, no problem. Let's move on to the other side. It'll be simple. Now at this point, I still have this pin securing right in here. Now, as I pointed out earlier, this is our 1/4 inch drawn on here. So we can now do like we did when we folded before, but I can go ahead and trim this 1/4 inch now like this. The other thing I love about learning from this pattern from Natalie is most everything we're doing are going to really, well, they're all straight seams, but they really become things that could have been done almost without paper piecing. So it's basically straight sewing, straight parts and pieces. It's quite simple is what I'm trying to say. Now, because we need to get these to fit on our 8.5 by 11, so you can print them out for free at home, this D1 is going to fit onto the C2. You would find that right here in this diagram. There's your C1, your C2, there's your D1 over here. Again, opposites. So as I bring this in, that's also my 1/4 inch, so I could lay that 1/4 inch right on the black line on black line, however you want to denote it, right? But I'll actually only use that for trimming later on. Right now, I'm going to use it just to position like I tried to before to make sure we were in our home. So I'm going to go right sides down because I'm on my right sides of my other fabric. I'm going to slide this in, and right now you can see my eye is looking at that 1/4 inch and that 1/4 inch, really hoping I have plenty. I'm going to drop this in here, black line on black line, and I'm making sure that I'm still plenty within my home target, so I can slide this in a little bit more. And again, this is our 1/4 inch. This is our seam line over here. So if I want to be really cautious, I can go ahead and set this piece right back on here like this. Okay, that's marking that piece. I can slide this out by laying my finger on here. You can see my paper's not moving. I can slide this over, and I'm using my ruler to protect my hand and protect my fabric, making sure everything is cut nice and accurately that way. So I trimmed that like I did before with the fold. So you have two methods you hopefully have just learned there. I'm going to bring this back to match up those outside edges, so I hopefully will have a little bit easier time lining those up. Slide that there. And now again, as I fold these over, and here's another thing. Yes, I do have multiple straight pins on this set. So here's something else we can do to make sure that we keep everything as accurate as possible, is I can come in here and I can put a little pin right here at that 1/4 inch line, so that when I now take both of these, and sometimes this is easier to flip them this way, now flip them this way, I know that that 1/4 inch was starting right there where that pin was, right? So these are a couple of the little tricks that we can use to help us with our paper piecing for more precision, right? And it really isn't the precision of the piece, it's the precision of the scrap and where the piece lands later. So we're going to go back to that 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to go ahead and stitch on through here. And we're just going to go ahead and finish this straight line all the way through, nice like that. Again, I'm going to open it up to check. If I was concerned that it may have been too short, again, I can lay that on there, confirming I have plenty. Let's pull this pin out of the way now so it's not in our way, and set these seams once and for all. Okay, so that's looking terrific just like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to trim down each piece, watching out for those straight pins on your cutting table, right? Let's trim down each piece as we need. I'm going to use this outside 1/4 inch line that was on the pattern itself first, and watch what I do. I'm starting kind of in the middle, and yes, I'm cutting through the paper and I'm cutting through the fabric at the same time. So you may want to replace your rotary blade when you're done with this. Okay, so I've trimmed this line, but only to the 1/4. I'm going to come through here. I'm going to come right onto that 1/4 inch line. I'm going to trim it. I'm going to come to this side. I'm going to trim through. I'm going to adjust my ruler to make sure I trim actually all the way to the end of that extra piece, and we still have one more to trim. So let's bring this around right now. Last time we're going to use this little dummy piece here, or you can set it anywhere you like, right? But I want to lay it right on using that external 1/4 inch. Here's my 1/4 inch, making sure I'm right on my black line, because now I can just use this 1/4 inch marker out here, using my ruler to secure and protect my hand. And now as I cut this piece can fall off, no problem. I'm going to leave these pieces on so it's labeled and I can come back in later on. This piece right here is this section within our mushroom, so I've got some other pieces to build. All the pieces are built in sections and then they're assembled just in straight sewing. But again, I like to leave the paper on to help secure the fabric pieces and the accuracy, because often we're now sewing kind of on a wonky or a biased direction, and it really helps things come together. So let me knock out the rest of these pieces as I can, and then I will show you the block itself finishing up. I'll be right back. Okay, and we are back, and you can see I have a major portion of the mushroom sections already completed, as I promised I would. And I guess I really didn't point out earlier one of the real benefits of the paper piecing, and that's like this section you can see here. So we've got all of these different angles and things coming together. This section was sewn with the red hash dot to the 2 jet black here, and then these 2 sections were made individually. As you can see, they've been stitched on now with their accorded pieces of paper. The paper is all left in, like I said, until the block is really completely constructed so that we can go through. I've been ironing around it and stuff. I will pull the paper out, teach you how to do that in a second, and I will also then re-iron it at the end. But let's finish sewing this together so that you can see how it all goes. So let's get it back into its appropriate orientations, right? So this is going to go here like this, and this is that stem portion that we created using the cocoa fabric. So again, I'm just going to flip these now right sides together, matching them up. I have paper on both sides. I can come on over here, and I'm really just going to trust the paper for my 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to sew right on that thick, heavy, dark line once again, looking through my presser foot, lining everything up, and just stitching right on through. Even in this section where the paper never quite made it, that was that end piece, and that's just fine as well. Cut our threads. I'm going to come on back over to my ironing board here, and I'm going to take a moment to press it. Trying to generally press into the section that has the least amount of seams. That'll just help bulk management in the long run. So you can see it starting to come together here. I'm going to go ahead and just line up the base like yay. Same situation, making sure my edges match. Coming on, using that paper as my 1/4 inch seam allowance. And stitching on through. Back to the iron. Press it over one more time, and unless you want a really crunchy quilt, I'm going to strongly recommend we take out the paper. And in order to take out the paper, there's a couple of little tricks I've learned. Let's start with a big section here. I kind of come back in and I kind of fold the paper again if I can, kind of pressing or squishing and squeezing where that seam was. Now what I'm going to really do is I'm going to hold one side right next to the thread with my thumb, and I'm going to start to try to peel away that paper as close to the stitching as possible. You see, if it tears away from the stitching, it's not going to be as easy, but if the stitching or the needle kind of perforated the fabric or the paper so that as I peel it away like this, then I should be able to come over to the other side with some ease and just remove. Now I like to keep my hands on the threads as much as possible because I don't want to be distorting my threads. I don't want to be tweaking my stitching at all. And I'm just going to go ahead and slowly work the paper out of the seams, just like that. Don't forget up inside of the seam allowances as well. You may find that having a pair of some small fine tweezers helps in some of these corners, but then nonetheless, just go through, pick out the pieces of paper, come back on over and repress or re-iron. to help everything get a nice structure, and you will start to become very proficient with your paper piecing. Not so easy for me to say, apparently, but I am super glad you are here today. I'm hoping I was able to give you just a little bit more knowledge of paper piecing. Remember, use that fold, use a glue stick or a pin to help set that first piece. I will tell you, in just creating the 3 little blocks for today's video, I feel so much more comfortable with the steps. I was flying through the parts and pieces of this mushroom when you weren't all looking, where it felt like it took me weeks to create those 2 over there. So like anything in your quilting world, keep your practice up, stick with it. You'll find things that you really, really love, some other things you may not try again, but nonetheless, we're here to offer you great education. So keep tuning in right here at Making It Fun. We'll see you next time. Thanks again. Wow, you are still there. Thanks for sticking with me till the end of the video. I know, I get a little long-winded sometimes. But if you did enjoy today's video, make sure you check out a few of the other ones we've created. I think they're terrific. And of course, please subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the little bell to be notified. I don't want you to miss a moment of the fun. Stay safe and happy sewing.